Hello and welcome. My name is Zafar Iqbal, and you are watching the Mojo Story. An Air India Express flight from Trichy to Sharjah experienced a technical snag shortly after it took off. With its when its landing gear failed, and it had to circle uh, in the sky for many times before landing. But what is important is that the pilot and the co-pilot showed absolute presence of mind and alertness, as well as a calm uh, attitude all the time till the flight landed. It had 141 passengers on board, and it circled for over 2 hours. All that was done to reduce the fuel so that the weight of the flight comes down for it to land properly. Now, emergency services, including 20 ambulances and fire services, uh, were put on a standby on the tarmac at the Trichy Airport. Now, a thorough investigation has also been issued, that's been ordered by the DGCA. As as this was happening, there were alternative arrangements that were also being made for the passengers now who would be going to their destinations. To discuss more on this, we're joined by, uh, if we can put up, Group Captain Augustin Vinod. Uh, he knows the field very well, like the back of his hands. He can help us to understand what exactly happened and how serious this matter was. Uh, Augustine, if I may start, that it looks like it was a very serious matter that did end up, uh, it did end up properly, that the flight landed and everybody was safe. But it seems like an extremely serious matter that the flight kept on making rounds for hours to reduce the weight because of the fuel that got used all that time.
Good to be back with you. Always good to be back with Mojo
Yeah,
Story
yeah,
and Barkas channel. Um, yeah, association that goes back to Kargil days.
right,
So that is the background. Another background is Safarbai is that apart from being a fighter pilot, I also fly the Airbus A320. I'm
right, right.
a current qualified captain of an airliner. So
So you know it
that
very well, more than
yeah.
anybody else who can explain this to us. Yeah,
And that is the aim
yeah,
to tell our viewers what exactly A happened. B,
right,
people who watch this show should have go back with a little satisfaction of as having understood
right,
the has what happened and allay any fear that they may have in their minds about air travel.
right.
And that is the whole aim of this interaction with you and Mojo Story mostly.
Yeah,
It's, I mean, I say it with pride that there is hardly any clamor. I tweeted
right,
about it also.
right,
There is not hardly any noise and a lot of substance, a lot of good question answers. So that way,
right.
I must urge everyone to a click and subscribe to Mojo Story and listen to it if you want real news. Don't noise,
Thank you.
go somewhere else. So coming to this particular part, and Zafar, by any aeroplane, see, 30 years ago, I mean, close to 40 years ago, I started flying. Those days, the aeroplanes were old. The redundancies were there, but not adequate. Reliability was not very good. If you remember, Morarji Desai ji, at that time Prime Minister, was
Yeah,
involved in a crash. I know the pilot and the engineer. The engineer who saved him, he got a presidential award
right,
from a gentleman from Kerala. Um, it was in an aeroplane called Super Constellation. And
right,
if I'm right, I think it had four engines or more, six engines or something. Superconi,
right,
we used to call it. So he was traveling in a Superconi when this accident happened.
right,
And so, likewise, many people post that have been involved in many accidents, but those were in helicopters.
right,
In last 3 decades or more, except where you had a Birdit or these two Boeing accidents because of a wrong software, there's been no major touchwood. There's not been major accident, and also accident involving undercarriage has become, an Hindi we say durlab. You
Yeah.
can't see it. Yeah. So, I mean, I flew an aeroplane which was of yesteryears, of 50s
Yeah.
vintage, in which I was myself involved in many accidents and a crash. In fact, the
Oh.
skin that you see is all new skin, so I was burnt
Oh.
in crash
Right.
and forced landing. So I've been through the trauma of a crash, and
Right.
not once, more than once, and I've had my share of,
Yeah.
uh, you know, nature trying to take me away and escaping it and sitting with Zafarbai and discussing it today.
Right. Right.
So, in this particular case, in this particular aeroplane, in fact, 737-800, they have three hydraulics. And what happened is when the aeroplane took off, the hydraulics did not uh, work properly. I'm not going into the technical details of it. It did not work properly, and the wheels did not go in. So when you have an aeroplane with wheels out, the fuel consumption is very high. It cannot travel large distance because the speed is restricted.
Right.
The cruising speed is 450
Yeah.
knots,
Right.
which is about 900 kilometers an hour or close to 900 kilometers an hour. With
Right.
the wheels down, we call it the undercarriage.
Right.
With wheels down, the speed is now restricted to
Yeah.
close to 400 kmph, about 200 odd knots,
Yeah.
depending on the aeroplane.
Yeah.
So that aeroplane continuing to Sharjah was out of the question
Yeah.
because A, it wouldn't have enough fuel to reach Sharjah. B, it would consume so much fuel that you won't have adequate fuel to reach, forget Sharjah, not even to reach Bombay.
Right.
So that is a uh, operational problem. And a second issue is about, um, and the most important issue is about the issue of hydraulics. There are three systems, Zafarbai, in this aeroplane. One is the main hydraulics. It's colored red, blue, and green and stuff like that.
Right.
So one is run by one engine. The second one is run by the second engine. The third one is an electrical driven hydraulics.
Right.
And in fact, in an aeroplane like Airbus, you have a fourth hydraulic which is run by a fan which rotates when the fan is deployed. It's called the ram air turbine.
Right.
It comes out, the fan rotates, and that drives the hydraulic and electrical. So there are
Right.
in some there are four systems. Why? Because it is like the vein and the artery of ours.
Right.
Without the vein and the artery, you cannot function.
Right.
Something similar happens with large aeroplanes. So these aeroplanes control columns are huge. They are long surfaces. The aeroplanes that Cessna and stuff like that, when we fly, um, we have manual controls, whereas these are hydraulic controls. These are
Right.
operated by hydraulic power. Without
Right.
that, it is not possible to operate the controls of this aeroplane. The
Right.
undercarriages are tons. We
Yeah.
cannot raise them or lower them electrically. They are raised and lowered using hydraulic power.
Right.
So if you have an hydraulic issue, then the aeroplane wheels don't go up, and that is what exactly happened in this case. So you follow
So despite the multiple systems that are there, still the wheels couldn't retract, and when the wheels didn't retract, obviously it was not possible for the flight to cover a large distance. It would not have been possible. So the SOP is that if the wheels don't retract, you keep on making those circles in the sky till the time the fuel uh, gets exhausted to an extent, and then you try and possibly come back for landing. Is that what has happened? So basically what you say, that despite three systems or two systems or multiple systems, it didn't work. It's a machinery after all, it can fail.
Zafarbai, there's a little difference.
Yeah.
See, raising of an undercarriage is not a critical activity.
Yeah.
Lowering of the wheels is a critical activity.
Oh.
So raising of a wheel, if wheels don't raise for some reason, it's
Yeah.
good for you.
Yeah.
So it's in some cases, suppose if the system finds that one of the hydraulic is working, but it is not up to the mark, say,
Right.
because of a fluid or a pressure, it will not allow the gear to be raised. Because once the gear is in, for some reason, God forbid, it doesn't come down, then it is accident, isn't it?
This
So,
accident. Right. Right. That is clearly an accident because it cannot land then. What
correct.
happens if such a situation arises? God forbid, if such a situation arises, is there no recourse, no nothing that can be done?
Good question. So there is one Brahmaster. So three ways of lowering. One, you can lower using one, the hydraulic, which it is the hydraulic meant to lower the undercarriage or the wheels. If that doesn't work, you can switch to the other hydraulics. That will lower the wheel. If that doesn't happen, you can switch to the electrical hydraulic system, which is
Right.
run by an electric driven pump. Even if that
Yeah.
doesn't work, then the fourth Brahmastra which we have as pilots, it
Yeah.
is a hand crank lever. So
Uh-huh.
what you do is you remove all the pressure from the hydraulic system and you crank it. आप
Uh-huh.
घुमाते हो तो it is a physical, so उसमें electrical power की भी जरूरत नहीं है. You don't need an electrical power. The cable goes and it removes the uplock mechanism. So the doors are held and the wheels are held using two U like lock.
Yeah.
आपका hand crank lever जो है वो that goes to the cable and the cable opens the U lock. The
Right.
moment lock is opened, because of the weight,
Yeah.
and the weight of the undercarriage is quite a lot. It's in tons, I told you. So it just
Right.
falls down and
Right.
it down locks. So this
So
hand crank
this
thing is something which
in
added weight.
very technical points that you are touching upon, but for ordinary people like us who don't know so much about technicalities, the first thing that comes to the mind, that what did the pilot do? I think in this case they kept their presence of mind, they're cool, they knew the SOP, what has to be done, they'd informed uh, the people on the ground that this is the situation, and that's precisely the reason that ambulances and firefighting equipment was there at the tarmac. And they, I don't know whether they informed the people, the passengers inside or not, but they were circling in the sky for a couple of hours or more than that before they landed. Specifically the role of the pilots.
Again, Zafar, a great question. You're always to the point and asking the right question all the time. So, in this case, it's two things. One is the passenger requirement. For an airline, passenger requirement, which includes passenger safety, passenger comfort, being on time, giving lowest possible rate to the customers. So the passenger requirement is parmo dharma. It is on the top of the pyramid of any airline. So that is not compromised, which includes passenger safety. So in this case, when the wheels didn't go up at all, it is a good situation. You don't have to now, you know, crank the wheel or do whatever you want to lower the undercarriage. So undercarriage is already down. You can come and land. Second question is, can the aeroplane? Okay, now there's another thing called max takeoff weight, MTOW as it is called, maximum landing weight. I'm giving you an arbitrary number. It is not the true
Right.
number. So takeoff weight can be 77 tons. Okay, landing weight, maximum landing weight will be around 65 tons,
Right.
nearly 12 tons less.
Right.
So that is the fuel on a long haul you expect to burn. In a short haul, say
Yeah.
from Chennai to Bangalore, you don't take so much fuel. So your takeoff weight is never at maximum takeoff weight. You
Right.
may be taking off just 2 tons more than maximum landing weight, or
Yeah.
close to maximum landing weight, or
Yeah.
sometimes even less than maximum landing weight. You take off
Yeah.
with. In this case, since they were going to Sharjah, they
Yeah.
will be burning nearly 9 tons of fuel. They would have carried close to 11 to 12 tons of fuel. So they are now above the maximum landing weight.
Yeah.
So ye point number one. Point
Yeah.
number two. Can an aeroplane, in case of emergency, land at maximum takeoff weight? That is above maximum landing weight.
Right.
77 टन बोला था मैंने. at टेक ऑफ 77 टन है, तो क्या आप 77 टन के साथ लैंड कर सकते हैं? आपका 65 टन अगर लैंड मैक्सिमम लैंडिंग वेट है,
Huh.
आग लग गई है, क्या करोगे?
Huh.
यू कैन नॉट होल्ड, यू हैव टू लैंड,
Yeah.
इजंट इट?
Yeah.
क्या कर सकते हो? दैट इज द सेकंड क्वेश्चन. द आंसर टू दैट क्वेश्चन इज यस. So you do something called overweight landing. उसका एक there is a standard operating procedure which is called overweight landing checklist.
Right.
You follow that checklist, carry out a overweight landing. After
Right.
the overweight landing, technicians and technical officers, they do some check on the undercarriage and see the stress levels are okay. Then they clear the aircraft. If not, they change the undercarriage, which is perfectly normal.
Yeah.
Carrying out overweight landing, sometimes you may have to carry out overweight landing due to impending weather. आप जा रहे हो और फटाफट वेदर आ रहा है पीछे से, you have no
Yeah.
choice but to carry out overweight landing. So
Right.
the overweight landing is also understood. Now brings the third point, Zafarbai, which is the
Yeah.
most important point, which I said, passenger requirement. So what is the passenger requirement? If I can, I should
Yeah.
be able to take the passenger to their destination, which was Sharjah. But if I take them to Chennai, or if I take them to some other airport where the runway is much longer, so the issue of landing with higher weight is you will need longer runway.
Right.
Otherwise, you will overshoot the runway, like it happened in Bangalore.
Right.
So if I have to land back in Tiruchirappalli, I have to calculate. So we have a tab in which we can calculate how much will be the landing distance.
Right.
So I will burn my fuel so much that I am within the landing distance of the runway, so that I can transfer the passengers onto the next aeroplane and send them to Sharjah.
Right.
It caters to two things. One, the passenger requirement, which is to send them to Sharjah as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Two, reduce the cost of the airline by not taking the passengers elsewhere, where you have to provide food, shelter, etc. Transfer them back to Tiruchirappalli, and from there take them to Sharjah. So, a lot of wastage. It can be as much as few crores wastage.
Right.
So, all these put together, the decision taken by the pilots were absolutely bang on, and this we practice in every 6 months in something called instrument rating check, which is carried out by a DGC examiner every 6 months. Every pilot in India goes through this check. If they fail, additional training is given to them, and again they go through this check. The system in India is very stringent, very strict.
Right.
You will find
And you talked about training. It's very obvious that the pilots were well trained. They knew exactly what has happened and what they had to do. The co-pilot was a woman. The pilots Ikram Rifadi, Fahimi Zainal, and Maitri Shri Krishna Shitole. They saved the day. The co-pilot, particularly, a women co-pilot, they were properly trained. They kept their cool. They exactly know what is the SOP. They, informed the people on the ground accordingly. And then when they knew that now it's the time to land, they actually landed. Can you tell us something about that? The training aspect you touched upon a bit, but particularly about the co-pilot, Maitri Shri Krishna, who actually saved the day. It's a hats off to her presence of mind, her training, keeping the nerve, and then finally landing the flight when it had to land.
good question. The senior pilot or the captain was from. He's not an Indian. He's an expat. Captain Fahimi. Captain Fahimi himself, I was just going through his records. He's an very experienced captain on Boeing. There's thousands of hours of Boeing, and flown all over the world. And Maitri has been with the company since 2019, and she's fairly junior. But see, airline operation is a two-person cockpit. Both persons have much more activity. And let me tell you, Zafarbai, and like you rightly pointed out, during emergency, the captain is involved in flying the aeroplane. His only job is to fly the aeroplane and take decisions. Rest of the emergency handling is done by the co-pilot,
Yeah.
like trying to lower the undercarriage, putting the airplane on hold in autopilot, trying alternative systems to lower the undercarriage, or hand cranking and bringing the lever down. Calculating and telling the captain, we need to burn so much fuel for us to safely land back in
Right.
Tiruchirappalli.
Yeah.
Also, while doing all this, communicating with the ATC, everything is done by the co-pilot
Yeah.
or the first officer. So the first officer's workload is almost 3 to 4 times that of a captain, because captain is doing a very critical job of keeping the aeroplane safely flying.
Yeah.
So he has no spare mental capacity to do anything else other than to fly the aeroplane.
Right.
So we have we have three mantras: fly, navigate, communicate. So fly, navigate, communicate in that order. This is the mantra of every pilot. So fly is
Right.
captain, navigate, communicate is the co-pilot. In that navigate, handling of emergency is also one of them. And Maitri did an exceptional job, like you rightly
Yeah.
pointed out. And if it wasn't the Air Force, mm, we would be giving them some kind of commendation or some kind of appreciation for their wonderful action. But in civil flying, I have not seen that kind of thing happening uh, at the national level. I'm sure, and at the company level, it must be happening. But then it is within the company. But in this case, they burnt up the fuel like you showed on the screen. I'll request the editor to pull it up. So
Yes.
the first part is they did orbit over the runway, and then they went south of the runway. Why did they do that? Because two more aeroplanes were coming in. So, like you
Yeah.
can see on the screen,
Yeah. Yeah.
over the runway. Then when they went south of the runway, did orbit at 4,000 feet at around 200 and around 270, 280, 300 knots. And then when they burnt up fuel, they came to land. This was because while they were orbiting, two aeroplanes were coming in from Chennai. The ATRs, they came landed to one or two ATRs departed also from Tiruchirappalli to the closer bases. One went to Madurai, I think one went to Chennai, one went to Trivandrum, like that. So operations at Tiruchirappalli did not stop because of this emergency.
Right.
And hats off to Tiruchirappalli administration. They had mustered in Zafarbai in record time the ambulances and had 150 beds ready nearby. So, in case of an eventuality, Trichy Airport was completely, right on top of the game,
Ready.
which was extremely, heartening for me to see.
Yeah.
And they came out and, told the people also. I was on Tamil channel talking in
Yeah.
News 18 or some channels in Tamil. And since I can converse in Tamil, I was telling the same thing which I'm telling you, so that those people are the relatives are calm, as we can see
Right.
on the screen. Maitri and Captain Fahim,
Yeah.
only walking away after going through one of
Yeah.
the most harrowing,
Yeah.
eventful flights of their lives. I remember when I had this burn. Uh, मेरा जहाज फट गया. When on takeoff it burst, so I force
Right.
landed. When I came out, my I'm coming out of the burning aeroplane, and my CEO was there. He had reached on time, my commanding officer. So when was close to him, I was singing a song. So he said, "Gazdi, you're singing a song.
you
The
know,
case in which I could have died is behind me. I'm
not
happy."
everybody can become a pilot. That's precisely the reason that not everybody can take up this job. This job is always full of challenge, and it's not for faint-hearted. That's very clear. As these pilots were walking out, as if after all that had happened, they were walking in such a relaxed manner. But I want to show, if the producer can again show that flight circling around. It's a very important slide. You can see that how They were circling around that runway, and the operations did not stop at the airport. There were other flights also moving in that zone at that time. Nothing stopped. There was things were moving on in a normal way at the airport, but it was clearly an extremely serious situation. What had happened there, they had a flight full of passengers. Obviously, they must have informed them that this is the situation, kept everything under control, and then landed. Clearly, you were telling us, Augustine, that not much appreciation comes about in civil land. But I can tell you that people on the social media have been clearly saying and commending the pilots for what they did. Obviously, that's the biggest appreciation. But in all of this, also an inquiry has been ordered. Uh, Etinder Bhargav, former executive director of Air India, we have a soundbite if we can play that.
एक्सप्रेस की जो फ्लाइट थी त्रिची से टेक ऑफ की, लैंडिंग गियर में हाइड्रोलिक प्रॉब्लम आई, उसके कारण उनको मतलब पायलट के सामने एक प्रॉब्लम आ जाती है। लेकिन खुशी की बात यह है कि प्लेन सेफली लैंड किया। नंबर वन, ये सेफ्टी एलिमेंट होता है लोगों को पैसेंजर्स के बारे में, लेकिन जो लोग इंडस्ट्री में काम करते हैं वो जानते हैं कि पायलट्स को सिम्युलेटर पर हर इवेंचुअलिटी को डील करने की ट्रेनिंग दी जाती है। तो जब टेलीविजन चैनल फ्लैश कर रहे थे कि प्रॉब्लम स्नैग आ गया है, हाइड्रोलिक स्नैग, कि प्लेन होवर कर रहा है, तो होता क्या है कि कुछ प्लेन्स होते हैं जो बड़े वाले प्लेन्स होते हैं, उनके अंदर डंपिंग फैसिलिटी अवेलेबल होती है फ्यूल की, और ये एक स्टैंडिंग ऑपरेटिंग प्रोसीजर होता है एविएशन इंडस्ट्री के अंदर में कि जब प्लेन लैंड करता है तो उसका वेट लाइट होना चाहिए। और अब क्योंकि प्लेन टेक ऑफ ही किया था तो उसको 2 घंटे के करीब होवर करना पड़ा ओवर द एयरपोर्ट के सराउंडिंग एरिया में, जैसे कि फ्यूल बर्न हो जाए और प्लेन लाइटर हो जाए लैंड होने के लिए। तो ये जो सिलसिला है ये एकदम स्टैंडिंग ऑपरेटिंग प्रोसीजर्स है। और जैसे आपने देखा कि हाउ द एयरपोर्ट रिएक्टेड टू इट, ये भी स्टैंडिंग ऑपरेटिंग प्रोसीजर्स होता है कि जब पायलट इन कमांड एक इंडिकेशन देता है कि उसको कोई प्रॉब्लम हो रही है, तो ग्राउंड सर्विसेज की जो होती है, चाहे वो एम्बुलेंसेज हो, चाहे वो फायर ब्रिगेड हो, ये सब अलर्ट पे हो जाते हैं। सो द ड्रिल दैट इज प्रिस्क्राइब was fully followed, and it's a very welcome feature. A sigh of relief can be, मतलब हम लोग देख सकते हैं कि एकदम प्लेन सेफली लैंड कर गया एंड ऑल प्लेन पैसेंजर्स वर सेफ। तो ये एक मेरा मानना है कि जब इंडस्ट्री के जो लोग हैं और वो ये जानते हैं कि पायलट को किस प्रकार की ट्रेनिंग दी गई है, तो हम लोगों को चिंता नहीं होती है। लेकिन स्वाभाविक है कि जो लोग इससे परिचित नहीं है उनको अवश्य फिक्र होती है कि प्लेन में अनसेफ हो जाएगा, लैंडिंग हो जाएगा। तो मेरा ये भी हमेशा से एडवाइस रही है मीडिया को कि डोंट हाइप इट, बिकॉज हैव कॉन्फिडेंस इन द एयरलाइंस कि उन्होंने पायलट को ट्रेन किया हुआ है फॉर एवरी इवेंचुअलिटी।
Right. Augustine, how well prepared are Indian airports like Trichy, for emergency situation like these?
Yesterday, it was amply demonstrated, Zafar Bhai, and I echo what the previous gentleman, Mr. Hitendra Bhargav, was talking.
Yeah.
हर 6 महीने हमारी जो ट्रेनिंग होती है, जो इंस्ट्रूमेंट रेटिंग चेक जो होता है, इट इज़ वेरी वेरी डिमांडिंग एंड 4 घंटे की होती है चेक।
Yeah.
तो एंड यू हैव टू पास इट एवरी 6 months, you have to pass it. Every eventuality we practice, including water, landing in water, landing without wheels,
Yeah.
fire, evacuation, hydraulic failure, emergency descent. ये सारी चीजें हम प्रैक्टिस करते हैं, हर 6 महीने करते हैं। एंड मैं वही शुरू में आपको यही कह रहा था इन द बिगिनिंग ऑफ द शो। सी, बिकॉज ऑफ दिस, बिकॉज ऑफ इंडियन पायलट्स बीइंग ए हाईली डिसिप्लिन्ड, बी being highly trained, and C being very true to their job. They are in high demand in very many airlines. Airlines give nearly double the pay that current airlines in India offer to Indian pilots to come and fly with them. Couple of
Right.
airlines I can tell you, Etihad, lot of Indian
Mm.
pilots are there. In Saudi, even the Saudi airlines as well as the low cost ones, Indian pilots are there. In Emirates, Indian pilots are there. Similarly, they have a low cost version, Indian pilots. Wizz Air, Indian pilots. Vietjet, a lot of Indian pilots. China, a lot of Indian pilots.
Right.
Everywhere you go, they are preferred because of the aspects that I told you, which
Yeah.
includes training and discipline. So, इस मामले में I am telling you that no, there is no second to us.
No.
Not because I'm Indian or I'm an Indian pilot. I'm saying this. I'm
Yeah.
saying this with data.
Yeah.
So I would request all the passengers who are our future passengers who will travel by air. If it's an Indian carrier, you should book the ticket straight away.
Right. Uh, of course, that was demonstrated yesterday, as you said, that everything was according to the SOP that was done by the pilots, by the people on the ground, by the staff. But tell me one thing: how often does such a snag take place? This landing gear does not retract or things like that. Is it happen once in a while? It's very rare, or it can happen frequently.
I have thousands of hours under my belt.
Yeah.
Not even once it has happened with me. And my colleagues who have thousands of hours who are with me, about 300 of them are we are in a small group.
Yeah.
I haven't heard such a thing happening with them.
Right.
So it's a very, very rare case. It's a case of a technical malfunction for which we have adequate backup safety, which I explained. So
Right.
there is, like I said, nothing to worry. You know,
You talked about training of the pilots and all of that, but there's also something that is important is coordination between the air traffic, between the pilots and the ground emergency team. In such an emergency situation, how does that coordination take place? It cannot happen without coordination.
as usual, just a background question. Absolutely perfect question you asked.
Thanks.
There is a word for it in the aviation. We call it the CRM, Crew Resource Management.
Right.
For that also we are trained. CRM training होती है हर 6 महीने.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think every 1 year we go through this training.
Yeah.
CRM does not involve not only uh, coordination between two pilots, which
Yeah.
if the way two pilots interact and work in the cockpit, if families function like that, there will be no divorce.
Ah.
So that is the kind of talmel we have.
Right.
But we
Right.
have to also coordinate with the cabin crew to keep the passengers calm. Training is given what to announce. Even that is done properly. Also coordinate with the ground agencies what you want when you land. So that is also part of CRM, which is what happened and beautifully we saw how it was executed.
Augustine ji, it was such a pleasure speaking to you. It added so much to my knowledge, and I'm sure it would have added to the knowledge of our viewers and have more clarity because we travel on the flights, and such a situation can come up. Any one of us can face at any time. But thanks so much for sharing those important details with us, and thanks to our viewers for tuning in for watching the movie story. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.